I like to treat them like they're my kids. You know, they're all different, and you have to respect that they're all different. So I just think in the future we need to have more effort put into research for the bee to improve the bee and to make it healthier. And through the hobby beekeepers and the individual beekeepers, I think that's sort of happening today. I've been a beekeeper since the 1970s. I used to work at a laboratory that it was for bee breeding and research and bee genetics. Bees are interesting creatures because they're a haploid-diploid system. So the female bees are all diploid. The male bee is haploid. And you need to know something about the genetics of the bee to know how to breed better bees. So the idea for the laboratory was trying to produce better honeybees, which is something that's really important. We don't do enough of it today. So there were people working on sort of the selection side of it, and then there were people working on the breeding side of it. And we maintained all these lines by artificial insemination because the bee normally mates thousands of feet up in the air. And so if you want to control the genetics at all, you have to use artificial insemination. So that's what we did. We did artificial insemination of all these bees and maintained all these colonies. We had thousands of colonies with bees in them of different genetic backgrounds. There has been an effort to develop bees that are resistant to Varroa mite, because Varroa mite is really the thing that has plagued the beekeeping industry the worst. So the Varroa mite is a little small tick-looking creature that gets onto the bees, and number one, it sucks stuff out of the bees, so it weakens the bee. But most damaging is that it gets on the developing bee pupa, and it carries a virus, and that virus infects the bee pupa and causes its wings not to develop properly. So it has deformed wings, and that virus is what's really hurting the bees, because if the bee can't fly, they're not going to gather any nectar or do any pollination, and the hive will just dwindle away and die off. It came here in the 1990s, and when it first started infecting the bees, and all the bees in the wild died off. They died because this mite killed them off. People developed pesticide to control the mite. The mite developed a resistance to the pesticides. So it's just been a continuous battle to try to find things that would control the mite and let the bee thrive. We also have poor nutrition of bees. The bee needs a variety of pollen plants, but in the agriculture that we do today, it's usually mono-agriculture. So you either have a lot of wheat, or you have a lot of corn or soybeans or something like that. Those crops are really not all that healthy for the bees in terms of producing pollen sources. They're fine for nectar, but they don't produce a variety of pollen. So the bees need some variety in their diet. Brown caps, that's all got larvae underneath it. They're making babies. Each beehive will have 30, 40, 50,000 bees in it, at least. When a bee goes out to a plant, it only brings back just a few milliliters of honey that it can take into its honey stomach to bring back. So it's just a small drop. You have a lot of bees that are going out to these plants and bringing that nectar back, so they can fill up a box with honey in like a few days. Again, the length of time it takes for them to produce the honey partly depends on what's flowing and how big the flow is and how many bees and how strong your hives are. But this year, my hives are all really strong. So all working together, they could probably make this amount of honey in a day easily. If you have a queen that's producing lots of bees and she's producing lots of honey and healthy, they don't have infections, they don't have mites, you try to increase those numbers of queens that are doing that way. I think if we didn't have bees at all, we would start suffering pretty quickly because we depend on so many things that the bees provide for us that most people are just totally unaware that all these things that they are consuming every day and enjoying are products of what the bees are doing. I mean, I'm an optimist, so I think that we'll get a handle on what the problems are and we'll fix them.